We're taught that governments work for the people and banks work for profit. Two separate worlds, two different goals. But what if that separation is only on the surface? What if behind closed doors, there's a quiet deal? One that decides who gets rescued in a crisis, who pays the price, and why the same cycle of debt keeps repeating. Tonight's mystery isn't about corruption you can point to. It's about a system you can't see. Setting the stage. To understand this hidden arrangement, we have to look beyond elections and headlines, into the machinery of modern finance. Central banks, treasury departments, commercial banks, and bond markets form a network that most people never think about. Yet this network quietly determines how nations survive recessions, how crises are managed, and who ultimately benefits when economies collapse. The twist? The rules of this system were written long before most of us were born. Origins: when power and money first aligned. In the early days of modern states, governments needed money to build armies, roads, and institutions. Taxes weren't enough, so they turned to bankers. In exchange for loans, banks gained influence. Governments gained survival. This was the first silent agreement. Governments would guarantee stability. Banks would guarantee funding. Over time, this relationship hardened into something permanent. Central banks were created, not just to manage money, but to sit at the center of this alliance. From that moment on, the fate of nations became tied to financial systems that ordinary citizens could not vote for. Rise: when crises made the deal stronger. As economies grew more complex, so did the partnership. Wars, depressions, and market crashes forced governments to rely even more on banks. Emergency loans became normal. Bailouts became policy. Every crisis strengthened the same pattern. Banks took risks. Systems failed. Governments stepped in. The public paid. This wasn't accidental. It was structural. The deal evolved into an unspoken rule. Banks could not be allowed to fall, because if they did, governments would fall with them. Breaking point: the moment the system exposed itself. The turning point came during global financial meltdowns. Housing bubbles burst, credit markets froze, entire economies stood on the edge. And then something revealing happened. Trillions of dollars appeared, overnight, to save financial institutions. Not hospitals, not schools, banks. Losses were absorbed by the public through debt and inflation. Profits returned to private hands once stability came back. The secret deal was no longer invisible. It was just normalized. Governments didn't rescue banks because they wanted to. They rescued them because the system left them no choice. Fallout: who pays? When the deal holds, after every crisis, the story sounds the same: recovery, reform, renewal. But underneath, the consequences remain. Citizens face higher taxes, reduced services, rising inflation, growing national debt. Meanwhile, the financial system becomes even more central, more powerful, more untouchable. The deal ensures that risk flows upward to the public while reward flows back to the private sector. The partnership doesn't end crises, it survives them. Failed fixes: why reforms never change the outcome. After each collapse, leaders promise change: tighter rules, stronger oversight, fairer systems. And some reforms do happen, but the core structure stays intact. Why? Because modern governments cannot function without the financial networks they depend on, and financial networks rely on government protection to survive risk. The deal isn't illegal, it's foundational. Modern parallels. Today, global government debt has passed $90 trillion. Central banks hold massive portions of that debt. Commercial banks depend on government guarantees. Governments depend on banks to fund everything from social programs to military budgets. The same cycle repeats: crisis to rescue, to debt, to dependence, to more power for the system. It doesn't matter if the crisis is a recession, a pandemic, or a market crash. The response is always the same. The deal activates. History isn't repeating itself. It's running on autopilot. 3 clear takeaways. Governments and banks are no longer separate powers. They function as one system in times of crisis. Public money protects private risk. Losses are shared, profits are not. The deal survives because it's invisible. Most people never see how deeply the system is connected. Warning plus open-ended thought. If every major crisis ends with the same outcome, banks saved, nations deeper in debt, then the real question isn't whether the system works. The real question is, who does it work for? And if this quiet deal continues, the next generation may inherit not just debt, but a world where financial power stands above democratic choice. Call to action. If you want to understand the hidden systems shaping your future, stay with Debt Empire. Subscribe for deep investigations into money, power, and the forces most people never see. And share this video with someone who still believes governments and banks play on different sides.